Practical Anarchy, A Guide to Self-Determination, Dickie Dredd. Section 76. Everyday Anarchism Revisited. Everyday anarchism is not a utopia waiting in the distant future, but a set of practices already embedded in daily life. As Section 4 showed, moments of crisis often reveal hidden solidarities, neighbours sharing food during blackouts or strangers rescuing one another during floods. Likewise, other sections reminded us that countercultural experiments, from travellers and ravers to squats and transition towns, have already created small-scale models of living otherwise. Anarchism is not simply a ground political project, it is lived in kitchens, gardens, workshops, squats and fields. Contemporary examples abound. Mutual aid groups that flourished during the COVID-19 pandemic built on the same principles of trust and reciprocity. What made these networks radical was not just the distribution of food or medicine, but the way they bypassed bureaucracies and hierarchies, empowering people to help one another directly. Housing cooperatives and community land trusts extend this ethos into longer-term arrangements, allowing collective ownership and shielding people from landlords and speculation. DIY food networks, community gardens, food co-ops, surplus redistribution centres continue the long tradition of commoning discussed throughout this book, while new experiments in digital commons extend it to the level of information and communication. Colin Ward famously described anarchism as a seed beneath the snow, an ever-present set of practices, often unnoticed until the snow melts. This metaphor helps us see how everyday acts of cooperation, care and resistance accumulate into resilient cultures of autonomy. These seeds are not theoretical, they are as real as the community fridge stocked with donated food, a housing co-op where tenants become custodians, or a group of neighbours deciding to repair a playground without waiting for council permission. Low-tech practices are central here, and their radicalism is often underestimated. Growing food in gardens or allotments, repairing rather than discarding, reusing materials and engaging in crafts all resist consumerism's built-in obsolescence. Upcycling, giving new life to what capitalism treats as waste, is a political act as well as an ecological one. Communal cooking undermines the atomised model of every family alone, creating shared rituals of nourishment. Living off-grid, whether by generating renewable power or simply reducing dependence on infrastructure, challenges the assumption that survival must always be mediated by state or corporate systems. The New Age traveller communities of the 1980s and 90s embodied these values in practice. They built homes from recycled materials, crafted wood burners and solar rigs from scavenged parts, and created mobile infrastructures of care and conviviality. As the New Age Traveller Way of Life Part 2, Building Homes documents, improvisation, repair and reuse are essential survival skills, a form of anarchist architecture that blurs necessity with creativity. Homes are not commodities, but evolving projects, constantly rebuilt from whatever is at hand. Likewise, Part 3 of that series, Sustenance, shows how travellers combine foraging, communal cooking, growing food and sharing supplies to sustain life outside the wage economy. Feeding a convoy is not just logistics, it is an experiment in collective survival, a lived critique of money and markets. These practices resonate strongly with today's rewilding movements and grassroots sustainability initiatives, which reject consumerism in favour of ecological repair and shared abundance. The growth of rewilding projects across Europe and the UK, restoring rivers, allowing forests to regenerate, reintroducing species, is not always framed as anarchism, but it speaks to the same principle, that human flourishing is tied to ecological reciprocity. Everyday anarchism, therefore, links ecological restoration with social renewal. Repair cafes, tool libraries, bike kitchens combine practical skills with community building, echoing the ethos of upcycling in traveller sites and squats. Nor are these practices confined to marginal spaces. In many towns, community kitchens provide meals on a pay-what-you-can basis, breaking down the charity model, replacing it with solidarity. Food Not Bombs, which began in the US in the 1980s, continues globally as an anarchist initiative that feeds people for free, often using surplus foods otherwise destined for waste. These examples prove that anarchist practice is not bound to a subculture, is transferable and adaptable to different contexts. Critics sometimes dismiss such practices as too small to matter, but their significance lies in their demonstration effect. They reveal that cooperation works, that resources can be shared without markets, that communities can provide for themselves. They also serve as training grounds, where skills of autonomy and collective organisation are cultivated. As Ward observed, anarchism flourishes in the interstices of the state, carving out spaces where different logics prevail. In this sense, everyday anarchism is both ancient and new. It draws on indigenous practices of reciprocity, rewilding, and living lightly on the land, while connecting with modern initiatives like transition towns, degrowth movements, and open source digital projects. It is about designing for reuse rather than waste, care rather than profit, cooperation rather than competition. Far from naive, these practices demonstrate resilience and adaptability, proof that another way of living is not only possible but already happening.